What happened at your school that still doesn't feel real? Our bus kept moving with the driver unresponsive. One student steadied the wheel, pressed the brake. True school moment measured in inches, not headlines.
Here's the one thing from my school that still doesn't feel real. Not a rumor, not a prank. A morning that split in half on the way to first period. It happened in 10th grade on our school bus with backpacks on laps and homework half finished. Every time someone asks, "What happened at your school that still doesn't feel real?" my head goes back to that cold ride, the windows fogged at the corners, the heater breathing warm dust, the usual sleepiness before the bell. And then the moment the driver stopped moving, but the bus did not. The bus kept rolling. The road was straight. Straight roads hide trouble. The driver's shoulders settled too low, like the morning took something from him. The wheel drifted a finger to the right. No one saw it as danger yet. The bus hummed the way school buses hum when everyone is half awake and the day hasn't chosen its mood. A speed bump shook the row of seats. Heads lifted. The driver didn't. The bus rolled past a stop it always took. Brakes stayed silent. The mirror stayed still. The hum turned into a thin thread of quiet. Even music in headphones felt wrong. That's when the air changed from routine to alert. The right tires brushed the curb and came back. The road ahead widened into the big intersection by the empty lot, the one everyone in our district knows. No red light yet, just a blinking yellow that asks for judgment. Cross traffic likes to guess there. The bus did not get to guess. Someone in the third row stood up. She moved with the kind of calm schools teach by accident. Years of being the one who returns keys, organizes sign-up sheets, straightens the stack of permission slips. Small, steady, a scar on the left knuckle from a bike chain years ago. She stepped down the aisle without noise, hands on the poles, measuring distance in heartbeats. The floor shook under her shoes. Children froze the way animals do when the weather flips. The driver was there and not there. Chin down, cap brim aimed at the floor, foot hovering uselessly above the pedal. The bus argued with the crown of the road and kept easing right. Outside, a truck waited at the corner, nose out, impatient. The bus drifted toward the future, like a heavy thought. She reached the yellow line near the front. Up close, the wheel was a wall. The bus leaned right again. She planted her feet, hip against the seat back, one hand on the wheel. The machine resisted. Mass prefers its plan. She leaned harder. Inch by inch, the nose came back to center. The curb missed by inches. That morning measured everything in inches. The brake had to be found. It sat low and stubborn. The gap was narrow. The driver's leg hung in the way. She ducked, shoulder against cold vinyl. Her hand found the parking brake handle. It felt stiff, like a tool that hadn't been asked to help in months. She pulled. Nothing. She pulled again, a grudging half inch. The bus kept coasting, heavy and certain. She changed tactics. Left hand kept the wheel straight. Right foot searched for the service brake. Wrong angle. The seat blocked the knee. She shifted, shin scraping metal. Toes finally reached rubber. Pressure. Not enough. More pressure. The bus answered with a long, wet groan. Speed leaked away, slow and unwilling. The intersection arrived like a test with no retake. The truck across the way froze with hazard lights blinking. A crow lifted off the pole and went somewhere safer. The bus slid into the middle of the space where decisions matter and kept bleeding speed. The pedal sank another inch. The nose dipped. The bus stopped.
Silence returned, but not the old kind. Charged silence. The heater hissed. A backpack zipper clicked. A coin spun in the aisle and settled. The driver's chest moved, shallow and pale. This wasn't a nap. This was a line across a day that started like any other school day. Neutral. Parking brake ratcheted up until the teeth found each other and held. The bus agreed to stay. Her hands shook only after the vehicle promised not to move. Cars began to slide around the yellow block, curious at first and then careful. The morning tried to pretend it hadn't broken. The school, a mile away, kept ringing bells on time, not knowing our bus was learning the cost of seconds. She checked the dash like a lab report. Battery, oil, temperature, fine. She checked the driver like a first aid poster come to life. Pulse, weak, breathing, shallow, color, wrong. Information arranged itself into urgency. The little kids in the back stared with the wide, quiet attention of people who understand without words. Help was needed outside. Calm was needed inside. The road didn't care. The sky didn't care. Caring had to happen on the bus. She stood taller and counted the rows in her head. She knew who always carried inhalers, who always had tissues, who always had a phone with a full battery, who knew the route number and the cross streets. Mornings teach you people without asking. She planned the next minute in a few clean pieces. Keep the bus still, get attention from the street, keep the small kids steady, check the driver again, prepare the next move. A red coat slowed in the lane beside us. Hazard lights flashed from the truck at the corner. The intersection began to understand. The cold air pushed in through the half-opened window and touched the back of my neck. I remember that detail more than sirens. Sirens came later. The cold air came first. On the floor, the notebook in the aisle showed a math problem with the last number half written. The pencil line dipped where the bus lurched. The page had a tiny rip by the ring that would never be fixed. The day would keep that flaw like a scar. This is the part that keeps not feeling real. The way an ordinary school morning turned into a thin bridge over a bad outcome. And a teenager carried the weight long enough for help to arrive. No headline captured it at the time. Announcements didn't mention it. Attendance still happened, quizzes still happened. The cafeteria still ran out of chocolate milk. But whenever people ask about the one thing from school that still doesn't feel real, my answer is simple. Our bus kept going after the driver didn't. A classmate kept it from finishing the mistake. The intersection arrived like a test with no retake. The truck across the way froze with hazard lights blinking. A crow lifted off the pole and went somewhere safer. The bus slid into the middle of the space where decisions matter and kept bleeding speed. The pedal sank another inch. The nose dipped. The bus stopped.
Sirens took their time and then arrived all at once. First, a far shimmer, then a blue flash against the bus windows, then the steady howl that turns a street into a hallway. Cars folded themselves to the sides. A delivery van blocked one lane on purpose. The truck from the corner stayed planted with hazards throbbing like a heartbeat. The intersection understood the scene before the paperwork did. Inside the bus, everything was organized by breath. Small kids stayed in their seats because stillness felt like a rule. Older kids watched the front like a movie they did not want to be in. The heater hummed, and the windows fogged and cleared and fogged again. The metal smell of brakes mixed with the dusty warmth that always lives in old seats. Time stretched and then snapped back in small pieces. A woman from a nearby car stepped into the street and waved traffic around us. She did not look at the bus much. She looked at the space around it and kept it safe. A man from the truck brought a reflective triangle from his cab and set it down with careful hands. No one asked him. He just knew what roads need when plans break. The first responders moved like they had done this on paper 1,000 times. One blocked the wheels, one climbed the steps, one looked at the driver's face and did quiet math with eyes and fingers. The questions were fast and simple. The actions were faster. A cuff went around an arm. A clip went on a finger. A mask covered a mouth. The driver became a set of numbers and then a person again. The numbers said he needed a hospital. The person agreed with a slow blink. The girl who had stopped the bus stayed near the parking brake. Her hands were steady now. A thin red line ran across her shin where metal had argued with skin. She shifted her weight to hide it out of habit. Her face was not dramatic. It held the look people get when they have finished a hard thing and are waiting for someone else to take the next turn. The paramedics slid the driver onto a board and then onto a stretcher. Straps clicked. Wheels bumped. The stretcher paused at the bottom step and then lifted like a bridge. The driver's cap rode on his stomach. His chest moved more evenly now. Color began to return in cautious shades. The bus felt lighter by a fraction the moment the stretcher crossed the last inch of air. A transport supervisor arrived in a district sedan. He wore a jacket with a logo that always looks official in emails. He climbed aboard, glanced at the controls, and nodded at the girl without ceremony. That nod said everything and also nothing. Policy would do the talking later. For now, the bus needed to be turned off and kept still. He flipped switches in a sequence only bus people know. The engine quieted with a soft shudder. The heater exhaled and went quiet. The silence felt final and kind. Phones buzzed in pockets. Texts stacked into stories before the facts had finished. Some messages said a crash. Some said a seizure. Some said a heart attack. Rumor loves the shortest word. The truth took longer and arrived in plain language. A medical event. A clean stop. No injuries. Delays. A second bus pulled up behind us. It looked like a twin. The doors opened, a line formed without being told to form. Backpacks shifted, feet thudded in a slow rhythm down the steps and up new steps. The little kids glanced once at the old bus and then moved forward because children understand momentum. The older kids dragged their eyes across the yellow paint, as if to memorize a shape they had taken for granted. I stepped into the replacement bus and felt the heater's breath on my shins, like a second chance.
School did what school always does. It absorbed the delay and kept moving. We arrived late enough to miss the bell, but early enough to be counted. Attendance still happened. Algebra still happened. The quiz that had waited for first period moved to a corner of the day and still demanded answers. I wrote them with hands that remembered the steering wheel and the parking brake and the way noise changes when luck runs out. My pencil dragged a little. Diesel dust had left a gray thumbprint on my sleeve. The smell of warm air from the vents pulled me back to the bus every few minutes. Memory is a loop when the body has been loud. An email landed at lunch with subject words that always try to be calm. Transportation update. Minor incident. All students safe. Acknowledgement of swift actions by those present. The sentences were tidy and careful. They were not wrong. They were just smaller than the morning felt. The girl with the scar on her knuckle walked into fourth period with a late pass and a clean bandage. No one clapped. She would have hated that. She slid into her seat and took out a notebook with a folded corner and a sticker peeling off. Her face looked like any face on any day that needed a snack. A line of road grit marked one shoelace. The teacher marked her present and kept teaching slope. The room followed orders because that is how rooms survive. By afternoon, the story had collected the kind of details that make memory stick. A coin had spun in the aisle and gone flat. A math notebook had torn at the ring. A crow had left a pole at the last second. A woman in a red coat had waved cars past like a dam. The truck driver had kept his hazards on until the second bus closed its door. None of this would enter an official report. All of it would live in our heads longer than data.
The driver went to the hospital and then to a different kind of waiting. Later we learned it was not a heart attack. It was a fainting spell with a name long enough to sound serious. It had warning signs that most people miss because mornings are busy and bodies are stubborn. He would be okay. He would need rest. He would maybe not drive again for a while. He had kids in another district, and a jacket with a stitched name, and a key ring that sounded like winter when it moved. He had driven our route for years without applause. He had earned a not small miracle. The district sent a letter home 2 days later. It thanked unnamed individuals for quick thinking. It mentioned training and safety protocols. It did not mention that training sits in the background until a teenager drags it to the front and makes it work with muscles and a bruised shin. It did not mention how ordinary the hero looked on a Tuesday in a crowded hallway with a backpack and a snack in the side pocket. There were small aftermaths. The bus company added a new laminated card above the driver's seat about emergencies. The triangle in the truck went back to the truck, but the driver waved at our route every morning for a week after, as if checking that gravity had forgiven us. The woman in the red coat appeared in nobody's official account and in everybody's favorite retelling. The girl bought a cheap pair of gloves because steering wheels get cold and skin remembers edges. The rest of us learned where the hazard switch is without being asked. A week later, the driver's daughter sent a message through the supervisor. "Thank you for keeping my dad alive on a regular Tuesday." It reached the girl on lined paper with a careful signature. She folded it once and put it in the clear sleeve of a binder that had other ordinary papers inside. It stayed there like a quiet certificate that no office could print.
Life reattached itself to routine. The second bus became the first bus. Routes shifted by 3 minutes that dragged and then did not. The intersection looked the same but felt different, the way a room feels after a secret. I still watch the crown of the road more than I used to. I noticed where right turns pull and where curbs pretend they are harmless. I kept a copy of our route number in the front pocket of my backpack, as if numbers could anchor a day. I also kept a quarter from the bus floor, because small tokens make good anchors too. What still does not feel real is not the sirens or the straps or the official words. It is the fragile scene between normal and almost. It is the way a regular school morning asked a teenager to decide what the next 5 seconds should be and got the best possible answer. It is how the rest of us went on to second period with heater-warm shins and wrote dates in the corner of our papers as if dates explain anything. Sometimes I pass the old bus in the lot behind the transportation building. It sits with others. Sun on the roof, paint a little dull, windows like closed eyes. You would not pick it out from the row unless you knew where to look. The parking brake on that one feels newer. The sticker above the dash is straighter. None of that is visible from the road. The road forgets fast. Students do not. When people ask again about the thing from school that still doesn't feel real, I do not talk about championships or fights or rumors that burned hot and died. I think about a straight road that hid trouble, a bus that kept going, and a classmate who refused to let momentum decide our story. I think about the cold air on the back of my neck and the quiet after the stop. I think about a quarter in my pocket that still smells faintly of dust and metal and morning. A substitute driver took our route. A winter hat covered his ears, his hand sat high on the wheel. He drove slower than the old driver. Nobody complained. Nobody asked why. Eyes watched the mirrors more than the view. The heater worked too well. The windows fogged and then cleared in patches. The bus smelled like rubber and wet backpack straps. It smelled like a second chance. Seats changed without a list. The little kids moved closer to the front. The tall kids drifted to the middle. The back row stayed empty for 2 stops. The aisle stayed clear. Shoes stayed planted. Head stayed up. Headphones stayed off for a while and then came back on at low volume. Quiet had a job now. It paid attention. The intersection by the empty lot looked ordinary again. The blinking yellow still blinked. The crow still liked the pole. The truck lane still collected impatience. The bus rolled through with the small pause of a person checking a lock twice.
My neck remembered the cold air from the day before and tensed for a second for no reason. That second passed. Memory leaves small fingerprints on muscles. At school, the day wore a normal face that did not fit right. Bells rang, doors opened, papers shuffled. Teachers wrote dates on whiteboards as if dates could anchor anything. A laminated note appeared in our home rooms about transportation safety. The words were careful, the tone was calm, the message was simple. Protocols work when people do. The note did not mention the scar on a knuckle or the red line on a shin. Paper never holds every fact. The girl kept moving through the day like she always did. Backpack on one shoulder, notebook with a peeling sticker, hair tied up for labs. She avoided the spotlight by standing exactly where she always stood. People noticed anyway. Nods met her in hallways. Doors seemed to open a fraction sooner when she reached them. These were not big gestures. They were small agreements. Everyone understood without ceremony.
The driver was not there. Another email said he was home, resting, following instructions. Grateful. The word grateful did good work in that sentence. It stretched across classrooms like a soft bandage. It kept a shape together. Gym class felt different for a week. Laps were quieter. Basketballs sounded louder. The bleachers smelled like cleaning spray. The coach stood with a whistle he did not use much. Posters on the wall looked more like reminders than decorations. Safety, hydration, first aid. The words had been there for years. They tuned themselves sharper. Midweek, the principal scheduled a short assembly. No drama, no lights, just a talk in the gym about what to do when plans break. The message was plain. Adults carry responsibility. Students can help. Help has shapes. Hands go here, feet go there, phones call this number, doors lock in this order, parking brakes pull this way. It was not a pep talk. It was a map. A transportation supervisor rolled a small wheel assembly onto the floor to show how brakes work. The advice was ugly and perfect. Metal, rubber, bolts, a demonstration without adjectives. He pulled a lever. He showed a ratchet tooth. He explained crown of road by placing a dowel under a board and letting a model bus drift right. Everyone saw the drift. Everyone felt how normal it was. Normal is where trouble hides. A nurse held up a red kit with straps. She did not show blood, she showed order. Gloves, mask, pads, compress, count, wait. The steps stacked like blocks. The sequence looked doable. That was the point. The gym's hum softened to nothing. The microphones clicked and went quiet. We left with a list in our heads that would not make the morning news, but might change a morning. In the hallway after, posters appeared on the walls near exits. Not many, just enough. Bold arrows, short words, emergency brake here, hazard switch there, evacuation latch under this cover. The posters did not shout, they pointed. That felt better than speeches. By Thursday, routine reattached itself with new stitches. The new driver learned our names by shoe color and jacket style. He took turns wider and later. He tapped the horn at the dog that always ran the fence on Pine Street. The bus rattled less when he braked. The heater kept our shins warm enough to make us sleepy again. Sleep returned in small coins, one drowsy minute at a time. I started packing different. A clean tissue in the front pocket, a Band-Aid in the wallet, a quarter from the floor polished by thumb. My phone as charged as I could make it. Not fear, readiness. Readiness feels like a light backpack. Fear feels like a stone. School did not turn the morning into legend, it turned it into practice. Drills got shorter and clearer. Teachers pointed to door hardware without jokes. Custodians checked door closers with a new attention that looked like pride. The security guard watched traffic at the big intersection during first bell for a week. He waved at our bus the way you wave at a friend after a long winter. Homework still existed. Algebra did not care about adrenaline. Vectors still needed arrows. English still wanted a thesis. Biology still asked for labels. The body does not track excitement well when it looks at a worksheet. It slows. It tries to be normal. It forgets and then remembers during lunch when diesel smell drifts in from the street. The smell moves through you like a short film where nothing happens and everything does.
There were small ripples you could miss if you were not looking. A second grader asked for a booster seat again after refusing all fall. A senior moved his backpack from the aisle to his lap. A pair of twins started buckling when the bus rolled above 30. The bus culture shifted a degree. No rules changed on paper. The bus felt different anyway. I kept seeing the coin that spun and then went flat. It sat in my pocket as a small circle of proof. It reminded me how thin the line is between a normal morning and a story you carry for years. It had a scratch across the face that matched nothing I owned and everything I remembered. I found myself checking it before first period like some people check Lucky Charms. It did not make me lucky. It made me present. 2 teachers stopped me in separate hallways and asked how I was sleeping. They did not use the word trauma. They used the kind of phrases staff learn in summer training and then save for when it matters. I told them the truth in simple pieces. Heavy the first night, lighter after. Heaters make it come back. Writing helps. Breathing helps. Quiet helps more than noise. They nodded. They did not add advice. They let the words set. That was the best part. On Friday, the girl who had stopped the bus sat in the library with a stack of thin manuals. The cover said things like procedures and operator's guide and emergency reference. She was not cramming for anything. She was satisfying a question with information. I saw the red line on her shin fade to a healed pink. Skin tells a timeline that calendars miss. The driver sent a note through the office with a simple message and a signature that looked like rain. The secretary kept a copy because secretaries understand what should be kept. A small card went up on the staff bulletin board. Gratitude travels on paper, even when stories travel by mouth. Both are needed. Neither is enough alone. The weekend came. Snow threatened and then thought better of it. I took the long way past the transportation lot and counted buses. Yellow lined up in even rows. Engines clicked as they cooled. In one corner, a bus sat with the hood up and a maintenance light glowing. A mechanic moved with a flashlight and a small wrench. The beam made a white line across metal and dust and old tape. The scene looked ordinary. It felt like devotion. On Sunday night, I set my alarm and placed my shoes by the door. I dreamed in short segments. A wheel, a lever, a light blinking yellow, a red coat, a crow lifting into gray. The dreams did not scare me. They organized memory into images that stayed still long enough to look at them. I woke up before the alarm and did not need to rush. That felt like growth. Monday morning arrived like Mondays do. Cold, dim, breath clouding. The bus doors folded open with a sigh. We climbed the steps. The driver nodded. The heater exhaled. The route began. The intersection appeared. We paused a blink longer than before. We rolled through. The school appeared. The bell rang. The day started. It was the same, and not the same. Both can be true.
That week taught me a thing I did not expect to learn at school. Not about subjects, about seams. There is a seam between routine and emergency. It is narrow. It is fragile. It is crossed in an instant. People hold it together. Sometimes those people are not the ones you expect. Sometimes they are 16 with a scar no one asked about and a steadiness no one trained into them. Sometimes they are a truck driver with a triangle and patience. Sometimes they are a woman in a red coat who understands lanes better than signs do. The story did not become capital H heroics. It stayed lowercase and local. That is why it feels true. That is why it still does not feel real. School teaches you formulas and dates and how to format citations. It also teaches you the names of your neighbors, the layout of your roads, the weight of a steering wheel, the texture of a brake handle in winter. You do not know which lesson you will need until a morning asks. A month later, the principal gave a short mention at a faculty meeting that did not reach students. A policy line updated in a manual no one reads unless they must. A sticker went on each dash with a cleaner font. The substitute driver finally took off his winter hat. The old driver came by once in a sedan to drop off forms and waved through the window without getting out. He looked fine. He looked older. He looked like a person who had measured a week in appointments and gratitude. The bus is still a bus. The route is still a route. The school is still a school. But if you ride with us and look closely at the first 3 rows, you will see hands sit a little closer to poles when we turn. If you watch our faces at the big intersection, you will notice our eyes take in the lanes and the shoulders and the crown without moving. If you listen when the engine idles at the curb, you might hear nothing special. That nothing is the point. It is the sound of a day that could break, but did not. This is what the week after looked like. Not fireworks, not a plaque. A scratch on a coin, a poster over a latch, a quarter in a pocket, a scar fading, a bus that stops when it should, a story that keeps choosing simple words because simple words fit in small hands, a memory that stays close to the ground because that is where we stood when it happened.
Years do what years do. They stack. They sand edges. They move you past hallways you once knew by smell. But some mornings keep their shape. I finished school. I learned routes that did not involve a bus. I got used to alarms from a phone, not a bell. I forgot locker combinations and remembered only 2 things from chemistry. I kept the quarter. The quarter lived in a small dish by my door. It looked like any coin. It was not. When I picked it up, I could feel the weight of a heater's breath and the long groan of brakes. I could see a notebook with a torn ring hole. I could hear the hush that arrived after the stop. Objects are not magic. Memory gives them work. The girl with the scar on her knuckle graduated a year ahead of me. She crossed the stage in clean shoes. She did not trip. She did not wave big. She held her diploma like a person who prefers action to ceremony. A month later, she posted a picture of a tire iron and a jack with a caption about learning to change a flat. It fit. Steady hands find steady tools. The driver came back to visit once near the end of spring. He did not make a speech. He stood at the edge of the lot in a plain jacket and watched buses angle into lanes like yellow fish in a quiet tank. His color was good. His smile was small. He looked better than the day, like the sky was trying to catch up to him. He shook hands with the supervisor and left before the late routes returned. He did not want applause. He wanted to stand in the place where a hard morning did not end hard. That is a reasonable want. The intersection stayed the intersection. The blinking yellow kept blinking. The crow kept the pole. The lot stayed empty except on weekends when a flea market tried to make it cheerful. Lines faded and were painted again. The shape of the corner refused drama. That is what corners do. Every now and then I would take a different road on purpose, just to see if the feeling had moved.
It had not. It lived where it started. It lived in angles and distances you can measure with shoes. It lived in the exact width of a brake pedal and the exact height of a steering wheel and the exact heaviness of a bus when it ignores you. The numbers did not change. My attention did. I noticed small things on other days that looked unrelated and were not. A handrail that wobbled in a stairwell, a door that stuck when humidity rose, a fire extinguisher whose gauge sat in the wrong color for a week until someone cared. Systems want to work. They need people to notice. That morning taught me to notice. A year after graduation, I sat in a defensive driving class to lower insurance and found myself watching a grainy video about stopping distances. The instructor rolled a plastic wheel assembly across the tile to show friction. It looked like the model the supervisor used in our gym. Metal, rubber, bolts. The same ugly, the same perfect. My chest did a small, quiet thing that was not panic. It was recognition. Training had a path through time, and I was on it.
Sometimes I run into people from the bus in places that are not buses, a grocery aisle, a clinic waiting room, a park. We do not bring it up much. It sits between us anyway, like a shared tool. We trade small updates, jobs, moves, dogs, news about parents. No one tells the story from scratch. No one has to. The coin in my pocket taps the fabric. I know I am not the only one who kept a token. Once, much later, a little cousin asked me why I touch my seatbelt twice. I told him it is habit. I did not tell him it is a marker. The second tug is for the line between routine and almost. It is for the seam that people hold. He did not need that theory yet. He just needed to see that small actions have reasons, even when the reason is quiet. Years change the red line on the girl's shin to a pale thread you see only if you know where to look. It is not a dramatic mark. It is an honest one. It says metal bites. It says courage is a series of unglamorous steps. It says weight can be moved an inch at a time, and inches can be enough. When I pass school buses now, I do not think about field trips or report cards. I think about the hidden map inside every vehicle, the hazard switch, the brake handle, the way the crown of the road leans you toward the curb. I think about how many ordinary mornings add up to a life, and how many of them ask for nothing. Then I think about the rare one that asks for everything, and how it still looks ordinary at first. On a winter visit home, I parked by the transportation lot at dusk. The light was the color of old paper. A mechanic moved with a small flashlight between two hoods. A radio played a song from 7 years ago. The row of buses looked like sleeping animals. One had a newer sticker above the dash, and a clean brake handle with chipped paint under the shine. I stood there for a minute and let the past line up with the present. Not a performance, not a ritual, just a minute. What stays is not a headline, no viral clip, no plaque in a hallway. What stays is a simple chain. A driver's body said no. A bus said keep going. A teenager said stop. Strangers made space. A district wrote an email. A week of small changes followed. A coin spun and went flat. A quarter found a pocket. That is the whole thing. It is small. It is large. It is school. When people ask now about the thing from my school that still doesn't feel real, I do not speed up. I do not slow down. I say it plain. A classmate kept a moving bus from turning a normal Tuesday into a tragedy. I was there. I can still feel the heater on my shins when I think about it. I can still see the coin spin. I can still hear quiet arrive and sit down beside us, like a teacher we did not expect. The rest of life learned from that day. Look up sooner. Reach for the brake. Know the simple steps. Keep a steady grip when weight argues. Leave room for the person behind you to do the next right thing. Carry a small proof that you can touch when mornings blur. The coin wears smooth where my thumb goes. The scratch across its face softens every year. The story does not. It stays sharp in the places that matter. It stays close to the ground. It stays at the big intersection by the empty lot, and in the narrow space between a moving wheel and a stopped man. It stays in the words I use when I finally answer the question. It stays, and it still does not feel real.